Good morning, everyone. Literary criticism and theory. That's our paper. So I'm directly introducing you the term criticism. Yesterday itself, we uh, began to talk about criticism as a term, as something different from what we have already in our mind. Some of your friends gave the notion. What comes to your mind when you listen to the term criticism or the idea of criticism? Immediately you think about disapproval or finding fault with. You are giving some negative reviews. But in the academic context, in the context of literature, you talk about criticism in a very different way. You have a very different take on the term criticism. It's an area, a special area, like you talk about linguistics. It's an area that delve deep, that take you and it takes you deep to learn language, its nuances, everything. Even traditional grammar is another separate area. Linguistics is even uh, deep. If you think about if you look at the topics, phonetics is another area. Actually, you can take it as another area. In the same way, literary criticism is another area that is available for the students, learners of literature. But what are we doing? What are we going to do in literary criticism? Actually, it's about defining, classifying, analyzing, interpreting, evaluating works. I told you. The process of reading. The normal way when you have a text at hand. You're reading something for the sake of reading, maybe as a hobby, sometimes for academic purpose, like you have some novels prescribed for you, some poems prescribed for you, poems prescribed for you. Please be on time. So that can be a way of reading, and sometimes you think about the characters. Sometimes you spend more time on some particular character. Some characters catch your attention. All these possibilities are there. Sometimes you just read a book and then you leave it behind. Even with the movies that happen. And I told you specifically, I told you films are another genre in literature, in art, not literature. Literature is one area. In that different genre, art as a art, if you take the whole an umbrella term, literary works are the second subcategory. So inside that we have multiple genre available. In that genre we have this poetry, drama, fiction, no fiction, and other and any types of literary works, even haikus. What are haikus? What do you mean by haiku? What do you mean by a haiku? Hmm? What is a haiku? What's haiku? Tell me. Tell me what's a haiku. Tell me. What's a haiku? Do you have an idea about haikus? Haiku. Arey, do you know what a haiku is? What is a sonnet? What is a sonnet?
49 poem.
Exactly. Mainly, the feature goes like 14 line form, and other features are the, but still, we talk about the number of lines and all specifically, and some features like themes that can be part of or that can be chosen for as a sonnet. That is, but as a whole, it's a poetry, kind of poetry. The same way haikus are very short poems like one, two, three, 4 lines maximum. That's what you mean by haikus. So here, what we will come to this. That is again, uh, even a haiku that can communicate something great. Great idea can be communicated even within 2 or 3 lines. So different types of literary works can be there in artistic area. So the same way, films are also some type of kind of literary and that demand our attention and analysis. Now we are talking about defining literary criticism. In literary criticism, what we are doing, we are defining certain features for literature, literary works. We are defining some features. Why this haikus? How can they, even just one or two, three lines? How do they communicate ideas? Some people say that it should have minimum this much length. Think about a novel. Why don't you call a short story a novel? Why do you have a specific type called novella? Novella. Novella. Novella is different from novel. Novel. Novella. Why do we differentiate? Then why short story? What are the different? What are the differences? Novel is comparatively lengthier. Novella is not that lengthy as a novel, but not that short as a short story. In between, short story can run to some 14, 15 pages maximum, but novella can run to some 80 pages. If there is no specific demark in that case, but still we have to know it's not equivalent to novel fiction as a whole fiction, but still we have this kind of a differentiation as per the length. So what's the first aspect of literary criticism you can take as defining? What should be this? This should be like that. This should have this much length. The characterization should be like this or that. Please be on time. Otherwise, please don't join at all. Yes. Then continuing, classifying. You classify. Sometimes you talk about elegy. Elegy, you specifically mention a type. This can be the topic. Elegies are that's not supposed to be celebrating something. But yeah, a piece of literature that has an element of patho, a mourning, tone of mourning, mourning, mourning. So you're classifying certain types. Certain literary types you're classifying. Then you're analyzing it. You're analyzing it. In the area of linguistics, you don't go for analyzing a literary work. In the area of grammar, phonetics, you are not analyzing a literary work. You are not classifying a literary work. That's why specifically it's literary criticism. It's specifically an area meant for the analysis, classification, defining of literature itself, literary works in general. We need an area to look at those works very seriously, delve deep into them. Unlike the way we go for a fun reading, we are not going to have a fun reading any longer. It's not a fun reading, a very casual reading, and leaving the books behind. That you mean when you are into the area of literature, or even without being a student of literature. You can be a serious reader. You can take your reading the materials very seriously. There you need all these features of defining, classifying, tasks of analyzing, interpreting. Very important, interpreting. That's how discussions come. That's how literary discussions and the effect and impact of literature come to us. You're interpreting things. Think about a novel in which a woman character is treated in a very inhuman manner. She is denied of all the rights. She is silenced at every point. At home, her own family members deny her education. She wants to go for some profession. Wants to opt out professional life, but she's denied that right. So in that case, you see a character and you are not ready to leave her behind as just a character. It's just a character. That's the base and the minimal possibility of reading and throwing something away. But at present, you can see this area, art, approach towards art. People in general, their approach towards art and the characters, portrayal, plot, theme, everything is becoming serious. You're trying to see things, you're trying to see life through characters, plot. So you cannot always stay away from interpreting. So when you see such a character, if it is a novel, if it is a movie, if it is a drama, whichever literary genre it may be, you want to think why this woman is treated in that way. So there's a parallel male character who is given all the provision to go for education, who gets all the freedom. So you start thinking about the inequalities looming large around you. Sometimes maybe in your own life, sometimes with some of the family members, some of your friends. You come across such problems and then you start interpreting. That character cannot be left out as a portrayal, a very mythical one, nothing. Even mythical characters, some in the mythology, you come across characters. Sometimes you feel like, okay, that's just portrayal. Still, you have some possibility of interpreting. You have some vision. You have the possibility to get something from them. It's a very minute context, very simple context that I have pointed out. Because now always we come across the problem of woman empowerment, lack of freedom, of problems of women in the society. Think about when you read Chimney Sweepers. Even if we discuss it in the context of English or British soil, we know how child labor is problematic, how it is causing difficulties in different nations. In our own nation, we know. In our own country, we have such incidents, such kids who are denied of every basic right. So there is no possibility of stopping or closing interpretation. You evaluate works. When you evaluate works, think about writing an essay on chimney sweepers or even Ozymandias. It was I think one of the questions, essay questions was with Ozymandias. I expected actually elegy, and I was wonderstruck when I saw this. But it's not possible. Any poem, even if it is a 6-line poem, if it is prescribed for you, you can expect such question, essay, paragraph, whatever. So evaluating Ozymandias, who is he? He's not directly connected to us. We never know him. Some king who lived somewhere, not even in our own nation, not part of the history of India. How does he become important there? But his stand is important. You have to evaluate that character, not just as a king, arrogance in human being. Where does it lead? Where does it lead you? So it is reminding us about the mortality of humanity or any living being. Mortality. What do we mean by mortality? Mortal. Being mortal. We are all mortal. We are not eternal. We have to face death at one point. So then there was we connected that Ozymandias issue with elegy by Gray, one specific great line we took and we tried to analyze that. Path of glory, how it leads everyone to grave at the end. So Ozymandias. So this is the way you analyze, classify, interpret. Everything is connected, intertextual connections. You cannot say that Shelley. That was written by Shelley. The other poem was by Gray. Why should we connect? No, there is no restriction. For doing all this, first of all, you have to take literature seriously. Then you have to know the importance of criticism. പറഞ്ഞു വരുന്നത് ഇത്രയേ ഉള്ളൂ. അതായത് നമ്മൾ ചെയ്യുന്നത് വളരെ എന്താ പറയുക, അതായത് നമ്മൾ ക്ലാസിഫൈ ചെയ്യാണ് വർക്ക്സിനെ, നമ്മൾ ഒരു ഇന്റർപ്രിട്ടേഷൻസ് കൊടുക്കുന്നതാണ്. വെറുതെ ഒരു വായിച്ചു വിടുന്നതിന് പകരം ഇൻസ്റ്റെഡ് ഓഫ് ദാറ്റ് വി ആർ ഇന്റർപ്രറ്റിംഗ് ഓൾ ദോസ് സിറ്റുവേഷൻസ്. അപ്പം അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഒസിമാൻഡിയാസ് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒരു കിങ് ഏതോ രാജ്യത്ത് ഏതോ കാലത്ത് ജീവിച്ചത്. നമുക്ക് അറിയണമെന്നില്ല അത് അങ്ങനെ ഒരാൾ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നോ. സം ഫിഗേഴ്സ് ആർ ഹിസ്റ്റോറിക്കൽ, ഡയറക്ട്ലി ഫ്രം ഹിസ്റ്ററി. But some figures are not even there. Some are mere creations, creative portrayals ആണ്. Most of the, even at least 10% we cannot say that everything is mere portrayals. പക്ഷെ അതിൽ തന്നെയും ഒരുവിധം റൈറ്റേഴ്സിന്റെ ഭാവന, അതായത് ക്രിയേറ്റിവിറ്റിയിൽ ഇമാജിനേഷനിൽ വരുന്ന കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാവാം. പക്ഷെ അതൊന്നുമല്ല നമ്മളെ വിഷയം. അവിടെ അതിന് എത്രമാത്രം യൂണിവേഴ്സൽ ഹ്യൂമൻ വാല്യൂ വരുന്നു എന്നുള്ളത്. ദാറ്റ്സ് വൈ I always tell you, literature is the humanization of the whole world. നമ്മൾ ഓരോരുത്തരെയും അതിൽ വായിക്കുമ്പോഴും ഓരോ ക്യാരക്ടേഴ്സിലും നമ്മൾ സംടൈംസ് അറ്റ്ലീസ്റ്റ് വി ക്യാൻ ഫൈൻഡ് our own trace there. We should not be a king like Ramesses, but we have to be reminded of the kind of glory. Everything is there for the time being, but later it may not be there. So every time we have to, the need to remind ourselves at least about this mortality. Mortality is that we are not eternal. We have to face death. The opposite is immortal. Immortal means there is no end. It's eternal. It's the opposite term for that. All these are something to be noted down. Now, literary criticism. Hope it is clear. I mentioned about some literary figures yesterday. Sorry, critical figure. So my first person to be discussed is going to be Plato. And I told you he's not direct writer, direct creative person. He's not a creative person. It's unlike Shakespeare's poem, Shakespeare's drama. We talk about some novels by Mulk Rajanand. No. He's not a writer, he's not a creative person, but he is a philosopher who already, that's the first task actually, defining, classifying how a work should be, analyzed, how such and such characterization should be interpreted. ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഓൾറെഡി പറഞ്ഞു വെച്ചിട്ടുള്ള ഫിലോസഫേഴ്സാണ് അവർ. അവരെ നമ്മൾ ആദ്യം പഠിക്കുന്നു. അപ്പോൾ ലിറ്റററി ക്രിറ്റിസിസം നമ്മൾ, ഈവൻ ദോ വി ഹാവ് എ ഡയറക്റ്റ് ഇൻട്രൊഡക്ഷൻ ടു ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ, we have to know this area, and then we have to become serious readers, then interpreters, evaluators of literature. Classifying and defining is not actually our task, because that is already done. A sonnet should be like this with the 14 lines. Then a novel should be of this much length at least. A drama should be like with conversation type. It's unlike a novel. Drama എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഉണ്ടാവുക? ക്യാരക്ടേഴ്സ് ഉള്ള കോൺവെർസേഷൻസ് ആണ്. അതുപോലെയാണോ നോവൽ? ഈവൻ ദോ ക്യാരക്ടേഴ്സ് ആർ ദർ ഇൻ എ നോവൽ, യു കനോട്ട് ഓൾവേസ് സീ ദിസ് കൈൻഡ് ഓഫ് എ റൈറ്റിംഗ്. ലൈക്ക് അങ്ങനെയല്ല ഉണ്ടാവുക അല്ലെ? ഡ്രാമ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് അതിന്റെ ഒരു സ്റ്റൈൽ തന്നെ ഡിഫറെന്റ് ആണ്. വിൽ ഷോ യു ദ എക്സാമ്പിൾ. Analyzing, interpreting, evaluating. So that's the main task of literary criticism. Then what about theoretical criticism? So what's the title of our paper is Literary Criticism and Theory. Theory as a term normally you come across in physics, chemistry, maths, theories. And when you have this term in literature, we are likely to be irritated. Oh, we don't like theories, all those brainstorming, demanding some brain work. That's why we want to be very comfortable in our topics. That's why we opted for literature. Even students come and ask us, Why are you giving always this communication skills and EVS kind of stuff? Why don't you allow us some poems, poetry, short stories? So this is the idea that is there in some people with some people. Why are you late? Hmm? So that is the idea that is there with the people before they come to opt for literature as an area of specification. That's a misinterpretation or miscommunication actually. Because we have every area of specification has its own nuances, its own areas, at least a few papers maybe the which demand more of our brain work. It's not easy as you just read and go with the poems or short stories and all. So we have to be very serious towards our literary works, and that's why we have this area of literary criticism. Then theoretical criticism. That's the next term, theory. Why this theory? Why do you talk about theory? Theory in literature. Already criticism has its own task of all these. And again, almost all the possible tasks are defined or given there. When you get a literary work, analyzing, interpreting, evaluating, after that, why? What else is needed? It's a maximum, but theoretical criticism. But still, they specify something called theory. What is that? It's actually after knowing and after interpreting specific literary works, it's a criticism is specifically for and the analysis of literary works. But theoretical criticism or theories are literary theories are standing there exclusively as theories. Whether you take that or whether you use it for literature and its analysis or not, those stand thereon. I will tell you, get you the example. That's explicit theory of literature. Explicit, openly, those are theories of literature with general principles. Okay, obviously, any theory as a term when you take, it has its own feature. Any theory, whether it's science, theory in scientific areas, scientific disciplines, or wherever theory is very a separate term that cannot be always, that should not be always with the science only. So theoretical criticism, when you talk about theory, it has its own general principles, set of terms, distinctions, categories. That's why I told you our contribution in the mode of our creativity may not work always. When you talk about feminist theory, it has its own terms. I told you like patriarchy. It's a term specifically defined by feminist theory. You cannot always mention it unless and until you know the basics of feminism, feminist criticism, feminist theory. That term cannot be defined properly. It's a distinct way of defining things. Otherwise, casually we can say like it's a patriarchy, male-dominated society. And it's not at all easy like the way you talk about woman, man, woman, empowerment. Even those terms also come as part of that theory. So feminist theory, Marxist theory, post-structuralist theory, all those will come to you. So they are categories. We have specific categories, general principles, all those as part of such theoretical criticism. Actually, they are tasks that can be taken for analyzing works of literature. It doesn't mean that the only purpose of such theories are analyzing works of literature. But if you take literary criticism, the main purpose is about attaching them with the literary works of literature, art in general. But theoretical criticism can be made use as one purpose can be for analyzing and evaluating literary works. but at the same time, it has its own social and other multidisciplinary impact and importance and relevance. I will tell you with the example how we can distinguish between the two. Standards, norms by which these works and writers to be evaluated. Standards are norms by which these works and writers are to be evaluated. That's why you made it. So theory is a way of seeing. Theory is a way of seeing in one way or other. In fact, very close way of looking into things, minute way of looking at things. Whether it's about a character, a plot, a particular incident in our life or in someone else's life, you can make use of such theories. Yes, that girl is denied of her education because of her being a girl. So feminist criticism, think about that. Feminist theory, when you talk about feminist theory, please don't excuse me. There are many theories available. We will come to that. Apart from but this can be given as a very casual example because already you are introduced, might have come across the term somewhere. ഇപ്പോൾ ഈ ഒരു ഫെമിനിസ്റ്റ് തിയറി നിങ്ങൾ എടുക്കുമ്പോൾ ലിറ്റററി ക്രിറ്റിസിസം ഞാൻ ഒരു എക്സാമ്പിൾ പറയാം. പ്ലേറ്റോ പറയുന്ന കാര്യങ്ങൾ അത് മെയിൻലി ലിറ്റററി വർക്ക്സിന് തന്നെയാണ് കോൺട്രിബ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. അതിനെപ്പറ്റി പറയാനും അതിനെപ്പറ്റി കൂടുതൽ കാര്യങ്ങൾക്ക് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് തന്നെയാണ് യൂസ് ചെയ്യുക. പ്ലേറ്റോയുടെ തിയറീസ് നമ്മൾ പറയും, അപ്പോൾ വരും അതിലേക്ക്. പക്ഷേ തിയററ്റിക്കൽ തിയറീസ് എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ ഫെമിനിസ്റ്റ് തിയറി എന്ന് ഞാൻ പറയുമ്പോൾ ഒരു നോവല് നമുക്ക് കിട്ടുകയാണ് കയ്യിൽ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു പോം വെൻ വി ടേക്ക് എ പോം, അതിലൊരു വുമൺ എംപവർമെന്റ് റിലേറ്റഡ് ഓർ പ്രോബ്ലം വിത്ത് വുമൺസ് എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ, അങ്ങനെ എന്തെങ്കിലും ഒരു പ്രോബ്ലമാറ്റിക് സിറ്റുവേഷൻ അത് അനലൈസ് ചെയ്യാൻ ഒബ്വിയസ്ലി അത് എടുക്കാം. ആ തിയറി നമുക്ക് യൂസ് ചെയ്യാം, ഫെമിനിസ്റ്റ് തിയറി യൂസ് ചെയ്യാം. അല്ലാത്ത ഒരു കോണ്ടെക്സ്റ്റിൽ നിങ്ങളൊന്ന് ആലോചിച്ച് നോക്കുക. പിന്നെ സൊസൈറ്റിയിൽ വരുന്ന ഒരു പ്രോബ്ലം, think about dowry issues. Here recently we come across a lot of cruel incidents, this male-dominated dowry system. അവിടെയും ഈ തിയറീസ് നമ്മൾ അത് പറഞ്ഞു കൊണ്ടുവരുന്നുണ്ട്. ആ പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ ചർച്ച ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ടി നമ്മൾ അതിലെ പല ടേംസ് യൂസ് ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. So apart from taking that or using that in the context of literature, discussion of literature, literary works, theoretical criticism has far and wide reach. You can use it to deal with the society and social issues as well. The other one, comparatively, the other one is somewhere stuck or in one way or other. പറയാൻ വേണമെങ്കിൽ അതിൻ്റെ ബ്രോഡ് ഫീച്ചേഴ്സ് ഒക്കെ നമുക്ക് അനലൈസ് ചെയ്യാം, എടുക്കാം. നമുക്ക് എല്ലാത്തിനും ബ്രോഡായിട്ട് അതിലേക്ക് പോകാൻ പറ്റും. പക്ഷെ ഈ ഒരു ചെറിയൊരു ഡിഫറൻസ് അതിലുണ്ട്. ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞത് സൈക്കോ അനാലിറ്റിക് തിയറി obviously got introduced by Sigmund Freud, not as a literary, it's not for analyzing literary works. He introduced it as a therapeutical technique, but later it was brought into the analysis of literature as well. അവിടെ അത് തിയറി തന്നെയാണ് ശരിക്കും. So used for treatment. Later it has its own development in that area. Someone trying to join? No. But at the same time, theoretical criticism, theory, if you take about if you take that as an example, obviously that has its own that discourse. It is used for many other purposes like treatment, analyzing or discussing the problems of a society in general. Think about the mob. There's a very recent incident regarding that bulljet issue. Was very little children, they are coming up with their own ideas. They are reacting in social media in a very different way. So people start talking about the kind of society that pandemic time. They're trying to connect the events of pandemic, that kind of the restrictions in pandemic time. Kids then they are going and getting addicted to social media. How their perspectives are affected. How we have a mob. It's a very important term that popped up in social media recently with in connection with this issue. So that is again, then people start thinking about the way people talk, way people behave. There you make use of psychoanalytic theory, even the new versions of it. We are not stuck in Freud. After Freud, his followers, his opponents, all of them developed this, and it has become a treatment related theory. It has its own development in many other medical development. Everything is there. Here you're late. Please join on time. Then, uh, so that is the see earliest enduring treatise of theoretical criticism is Aristotle's Poetics. That's a main idea you have to take. But I told you already. mm, in our syllabus, when you take our syllabus, going to that syllabus content. mm, yes. Okay, that's not available here. So I told you about making Plato, taking Plato in the beginning and then going to Aristotle. Obviously, Aristotle's contributions are much more relevant. It's about classical age. Classical age. Hope you have a clear-cut idea with this BC, AD, all those now. Even with the poetry paper, we discussed that. And as you are studying history of English literature, hope you have a clear cut idea about that specific ages, like centuries. But here we are going back to classical age. And we will have to discuss the term first. What do you mean by classic? What is this classic? We talk about classic songs and all. But what about this classic? We'll come to that. Classic is the works of the highest class. Actually, nowadays, this elitist way of thinking of approaching things that prevent that actually we the once the society becomes broadened with the incorporation, tolerance, everyone should get representation. Such ideas are taken for granted nowadays. But still, we come across people who never want everyone to be equal. But everyone equalizing everyone is a myth. Actually, it cannot happen. Some people prefer that. A very few people prefer that equality. It's not. It's totally an impossibility. I understand now. But so this classic is a works of the highest class. Sometimes we mention this term in connection with some songs, and it's a classic song. Classic song. When you go back to that remote past era, classic could be taken as the works of the highest class only. But actually, if you take it in a very broader spectrum, it's continued such works that have continued to be read and enjoyed throughout by generations of readers can be taken as something classic. That means, irrespective of the age, national, and other barriers like national geographical, such other specifications, those works have continued to be read and enjoyed throughout the history of readership and literary productivity. Such works by generations of readers. We read Shakespeare. Why should we read a writer of 16th century? So obviously Shakespeare has his own place in English literature. He claimed his space in English literature. So he's there, and generations of why do we have a paper like reading Shakespeare? Why don't we have a paper like reading Bernard Shaw? But it doesn't mean that Bernard Shaw is not important. Obviously, he has his own contributions. But how does one particular writer, specific writer, become a classic figure? The major feature is this. His or her writings are continued to be read and enjoyed throughout by generations of readers. So, with the classicism, from that, or if you want, take it specifically or separately, classicism has become a feature in literature. It has become an attitude to literature, an attitude towards literature. What is it? Admiration of qualities, a formal balance, proportion, decorum, restraint, attributed to major works of ancient Greek and Roman literature. That is it. Where does this Plato come from? Where does Aristotle come from? Do they belong to India? Do they belong to British soil? No. Actually, these are they are part of classic languages, some classic languages like Greek, Roman, Latin. Certain languages are the classic. Those are having a classic label, and those writers, those interpreters, those philosophers from those languages, such cultures are taken as classic figures. Their ideas are still now, even now, those are again learned and looked back again and again. We never leave them behind as of such outdated figures. It doesn't happen. Why should we think about Aristotle now? We have multiple other ways of writing or talking about literature. Now we have modern techniques in writing, modern way of interpreting things. Why should we deal about this? Deal with this Plato and Aristotle, those that classic outdated figures. Impossible for us to do because we cannot always leave them behind because their contributions are very important. പറഞ്ഞത് ഇത്രയേ ഉള്ളൂ. അവർ ബിലോങ് ചെയ്യുന്ന സെഞ്ചുറി ഇതൊക്കെ നമ്മൾ ഓരോരുത്തരെയും പറയുമ്പോൾ പറയും. പ്ലേറ്റോയുടെ ടൈം പീരീഡ് ഓഫ് ഹിസ് ബിലോങ്ങിങ് ടു ഹിസ് ലൈഫ് സ്പാൻ പറയുമ്പോൾ എത്രമാത്രം മുന്നേ ഉള്ള ഒരാളാണ്. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്, നമ്മൾ പറയുന്ന കാര്യങ്ങൾ കേൾക്കുമ്പോൾ വി ഫീൽ ലൈക്ക് അയ്യോ ഇതെന്തിനാണ് ഇങ്ങനെയൊന്നും അല്ലല്ലോ, ഇന്നത്തെ ഒരു ലിറ്റററി വർക്ക്സിനോടുള്ള അപ്രോച്ച് ഇതൊന്നും അല്ലല്ലോ, പിന്നെന്തിനാണ് നമ്മൾ ഇവരെ പഠിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്? ഐ ഷുഡ് ബി ലേൺ ദം സീരിയസ്ലി. പക്ഷെ എന്താണ്, നമുക്ക് ഇപ്പോഴും അറിയാം മോഡേൺ റൈറ്റിങ്സ് ഒരുപാടുണ്ട്, മോഡേൺ റൈറ്റിംഗ് ടെക്നിക്സ് ഒരുപാടുണ്ട് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞതുകൊണ്ട് നമ്മൾ പഴയ കാര്യങ്ങൾ, പഴയ ടൈപ്പ് ഓഫ് റൈറ്റിങ്സ് വായിക്കാണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നില്ല. ഇന്നും നമ്മൾ ബെയോവുൾഫിനെ ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. ഇറ്റ് സ്റ്റാർട്ട്സ് വിത്ത് ബെയോവുൾഫ്, then only you go to next century. Even ചോസറിനെക്കാളും വല്ല ബെയോവുൾഫ് പറയും. Even if it is an anonymous, it doesn't have a writer, we don't know the writer, still we discuss that. അത്രയും നമുക്ക് എന്താണ് ടു ഗോ ഇൻ എൻ ഓർഗനൈസ്ഡ് വേ, വൺ ആഫ്റ്റർ അനദർ, ടു നോ ദ കോൺട്രിബ്യൂഷൻ, ദെൻ ഓൺലി വി അണ്ടർസ്റ്റാൻഡ് ദ ഇവല്യൂഷൻ. ഈ ഏരിയാസ് ഒക്കെ ഡെവലപ്പിംഗ് ആണ് എവറി ഡേ. ഈവൻ ദ മൊമെന്റ് ഓഫ് അവർ സ്പീക്കിംഗ് ഹിയർ, സം പീപ്പിൾ ആർ തിങ്കിങ് ആൻഡ് മേക്കിംഗ് ന്യൂ തിയറീസ്. അതുപോലെ അവരന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഇന്നത് എത്രമാത്രം റെലവെന്റ് ആണ്, പ്രാക്ടിക്കൽ ആണെന്നുള്ളതല്ല. അത് പറഞ്ഞ പല കാര്യങ്ങളും നമുക്ക് അക്സെപ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റില്ല. ഒബ്വിയസ്ലി ഐ ടെൽ യു. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് എപ്പോഴും whenever we teach Plato and Aristotle, some students show it on their face. We miss out all those in online sessions. ഭയങ്കര സങ്കടമാണ് ശരിക്കും. Some people like, oh, ഇപ്പൊ കൈ കിട്ടിയാൽ അരിസ്റ്റോട്ടലിനെയോ പ്ലേറ്റോനെയൊക്കെ would have shot at sight എന്നുള്ള രീതിയിലാണ് ഫേഷ്യൽ എക്സ്പ്രഷൻസ്. വൈ ആർ യു ടോക്കിംഗ് ഓൾ ദോസ്, ദേ ആർ ടോക്കിംഗ് ഓൾ ദോസ് നോൺസെൻസ് ബിക്കോസ് ദേ ആർ സ്റ്റിക്കിംഗ് ഓൺ, ദേ ആർ സംവെയർ വെരി സ്ട്രിക്റ്റ് ടുവേർഡ്സ് ഡിക്കോറം, റിസ്ട്രെയിൻറ്റ്. എന്താണ് കൺസ്ട്രെയിൻസ് ആണ്, എല്ലായിടത്തും റൂൾസ് ആണ് അവർ പറയുക. ഇന്ന രീതിയിൽ എഴുതണം, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അത് അങ്ങനെയേ അല്ല, അത് പോയമേ അല്ല. പോയറ്റ്സ് ഒക്കെ ഇന്ന രീതിയിൽ എഴുതണം, പോയറ്റ്സ് ഒക്കെ ഇന്ന രീതിയിൽ മാത്രമുള്ള തീംസ് ഓപ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യണം എന്നൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞ ആൾക്കാരാണ് ക്ലാസിക്കല്. അതായത് നമ്മളിപ്പോൾ പറയും, നിങ്ങൾ ആലോചിച്ചൊക്കെ, നമ്മൾ ജസ്റ്റ് വെരി കാഷ്വലി യു തിങ്ക് ട്രൈ ടു ഹാവ് എ ഡിസ്റ്റിങ്ഷൻ ബിറ്റ്വീൻ ഓൾഡ് ജനറേഷൻ ആൻഡ് ന്യൂ ജനറേഷൻ. ശരിക്കും പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഇടക്കാലത്തുള്ള ഓൾഡ് ജനറേഷൻ എന്ന് നമ്മൾ വിളിക്കുന്ന ആൾക്കാരുടെ അത്ര പോലും ബ്രോഡ് അല്ലാത്ത കുറേ ആൾക്കാരാണ് ശരിക്കും ന്യൂ ജനറേഷനാണ് നമ്മളെന്ന് സ്വയം പറഞ്ഞ് നടക്കുന്നത്. അത്രയും നാരോ മൈൻഡഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ആൾക്കാരൊക്കെ ഉണ്ട്. ഇപ്പൊ വെറുതെ ഒരു ജനറേഷനിൽ ബിലോങ് ചെയ്തെന്ന് അങ്ങനെയാണെങ്കിൽ അടുത്ത നെക്സ്റ്റ് വരുന്ന ജനറേഷൻ നമ്മളെ ഓൾഡ് ജനറേഷൻ എന്ന് വിളിക്കും. പക്ഷെ അതിൽ തോട്ട്സിന്റെ റിനോവേഷൻ ഓഫ് തോട്ട്സ് ആൻഡ് പെർസ്പെക്റ്റീവ്സ് ആക്ച്വലി മാറ്റേഴ്സ്. അവിടെയാണ് ഇവർ പറഞ്ഞത് ഒബ്വിയസ്ലി റിസ്ട്രെയിൻസും കൺസ്ട്രെയിൻസും ഒക്കെ ഉള്ള രീതിയിലുള്ളത് തന്നെയാണ്. അതേസമയം അതും ഒരിക്കലും നമ്മൾ ഇന്ന് ഏറ്റവും ലേറ്റസ്റ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ജനറേഷൻ ആണെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞതുകൊണ്ട് മാത്രം നമ്മൾ ബ്രോഡ് മൈൻഡഡോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കുറെ പിന്നെ ഒരു എന്താ പറയുക പെർസ്പെക്റ്റീവ് ചേഞ്ച് ഉള്ള ഒരു ജനറേഷൻ ആണെന്ന് പറയാൻ ഇറ്റ്സ് നോട്ട് എ ക്ലെയിം. ദർ ഇസ് നോ ക്ലെയിം ഇൻ ദാറ്റ് വേ. പിന്നെ ഒന്ന് ആലോചിച്ചു നോക്കി, ഇപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ വൈ ഡു വി ഡിസ്കസ് പ്ലേറ്റോ ആൻഡ് അരിസ്റ്റോട്ടിൽ എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ നമ്മളിപ്പോൾ പുതിയ ന്യൂ ജനറേഷൻ മൂവീസ് ഉണ്ട് എന്ന് വിചാരിച്ചിട്ട് നമ്മൾ പഴയ മൂവീസ് വന്നാൽ കാണാണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നുണ്ടോ? ഇല്ല. അപ്പൊ അതുപോലെ തന്നെയാണ് അവർ പറഞ്ഞു വെച്ച കാര്യങ്ങൾ നമുക്കറിയണം. ഹിസ്റ്ററി ഓഫ് ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് ലാംഗ്വേജ് തന്നെ എടുത്തു നോക്കാം. ഇന്ന് നമ്മൾ മോഡേൺ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് അല്ലേ പഠിക്കുന്നത്. പിന്നെ എന്തിനാണ് നിങ്ങൾ അന്നത്തെ സിമ്പിൾസും അന്നത്തെ സ്പെസിഫിക്കേഷൻസും കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ ചോദിക്കുന്നത്? there is a reason. We have to know this language didn't come in this form all of a sudden. We did have such other form, and later it came to Middle English. Then only we have this modern English, the new form that we hold at present. I hope I'm making sense. ഇവിടെ പറയുന്നത് ഇതാണ്, ക്ലാസിസിസം എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ തന്നെ അവിടെ എന്തായി? റൈറ്റേഴ്സ് മസ്റ്റ് ബി ഗവേൺഡ് ബൈ റൂൾസ്, മോഡൽസ്. You follow that writer, you follow this writer, you try to be like him or her. ഹെർ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യനേ ഇല്ല അവിടെ. ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ ഒരു സന്തോഷത്തിന് പറയുന്നതാണ്. There is no question of her during that time, because you're a woman, you're not supposed to write or think, even be at home, be married and look after kids, children. That was their attitude, stance. So this is the way, models, conventions rather than wayward inspiration. Actually what they take as wayward inspiration, it's unlike the wayward means what? Sorry. Wayward means you are not very thoughtful, you just say things very casually without thinking about the meanings or underlying meanings. Connotation, sometimes we didn't mean it, but some people interpret in that way. That happens because you leave out a space for interpretation in that. Sometimes you do not mean double meanings. People take so wayward inspiration. Out of that, if you write, you cannot be, you couldn't be actually acknowledged by classicism. ക്ലാസിക് ആ ടൈമിലാണ് നമുക്ക് അങ്ങനെ ഒന്നും എഴുതിയിടാൻ പറ്റില്ല, എന്തെങ്കിലും ഒന്നും എഴുതിയിടാൻ പറ്റില്ല. അവർക്ക് ഇത്രയും റൂൾസ് ഉണ്ട്, അങ്ങനെ ചെയ്യണം, ഇങ്ങനെ ചെയ്യണം, ഇങ്ങനെ എഴുതണം. ഇതാണ് അവരുടെ സ്റ്റാൻഡ്. So definite ideas and attitudes about literature. Sense of restraint. It's about that restraint is about strict rules, regulations, rules. Yeah, stick to this. No other. Restricted scope. നമുക്ക് ഇന്നെന്താണ് ഇന്ന് പറയുന്നതിൽ there is nothing that cannot be discussed by literature. There is nothing that cannot be discussed by literature now. But during that time, they wanted the dominance, assure the dominance of reason, everything, only reasonable things. നമ്മൾ ശരിക്കും പറഞ്ഞാൽ ആർട്ടിൽ റീസൺ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടൊരു സാധനം നമുക്ക് അങ്ങനെ എപ്പോഴും ഒന്നും അഷ്വർ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റൂല. അങ്ങനെയാണെങ്കിൽ ഇമാജിനേഷൻ ഇല്ല, ആ കോൺസെപ്റ്റേ മാറി. ആർട്ട് എന്ന് പറയുന്നതിന് ഇമാജിനേഷനോട് ഹൈലി കണക്റ്റഡ് ആണ്. അറ്റ് ദാറ്റ് ടൈം ആക്ച്വലി ദീസ് ലിറ്റററി ഫിഗേഴ്സ് wanted to stick on to reason. Sense of form, everything in a very formal and form based, എല്ലാം കൃത്യമായിട്ടുള്ള ഫോംസിൽ. യൂണിറ്റി ഓഫ് പേർപ്പസ്, ഡിസൈൻ. 14 ലൈൻ 14 ലൈൻ, മീറ്റർ, മെട്രിക്കൽ കോമ്പോസിഷൻ. ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള ഒരു തരത്തിലുള്ള ഒരു സ്റ്റിക്കിംഗ് ഓൺ ടു ഡിക്കോറം. that was there during classical time. And we are going to meet such classical figures, and we will have to tolerate them actually. Importance of clarity in expression. Objectivity is our passion. Objectivity our passion. It's a symbol marked down to show its dominance. Passion, objectivity is important for them, not passion. Passion is something managed by emotion, emotional content. Objectivity is always managed by intelligent quotient. So that is it. And then for the time being, I stop for the time being. Thank you so much for listening patiently.